Just line us up. Look through the viewfinder and make it a lot easier public. You can just minimize that. Thank you, So welcome. Ooh, that's good. If I do not use the mic, I know Sandy would definitely let me know. But thank y'all for being here. This is a special day for Dr. Pat, and we appreciate everyone being here. My name is Michael Boone. So I've been communicating with some of you, and I've just been very appreciative of all the stories that y'all sent in. I know Dr. Pat will be able to see them later, and it just shows how much she means to everyone. So thank you for being here. I wanted to introduce Dr. Hartness. So he is the president of Davidson County Community College.
Good afternoon and welcome to Davidson County Community College on this beautiful winter day. It is a pleasure to have everyone inside, right? Just a few months ago, we had a retiree brunch, and a lot of our retirees came back on campus and did campus tours and mingled for several hours. It's good to see a number of you back this afternoon. My name is Darren Hartness. Since January the 1st of 2019, I've had the honor of serving as the 4th president of Davidson County Community College. And it is quite an honor to have each of you on our campus from across the state, people that have been impacted by Pat, and all that you have done, Pat, to leave a legacy here at Davidson County Community College and touch people across the state of North Carolina. So we're honored to have you here and honored to have each of you as our guest. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing great stories about you, Pat.
Next up, I want to introduce George Fouts. George has done quite a few things within the system. I know that he's been interim for a few community colleges. I don't think there's anything that George hasn't done. It's like I'm trying to go through the list and I think he's done them all. So George, I had met George last year and I feel like he's the historian of our system. And so we'd like him to come up and share some words about Dr. Pat's history. Thank you, sir.
A word of explanation, I'm not Brian Brooks. Brian, we don't know what's happened to Brian. He confirmed that he was going to be here, and so we're a bit concerned. And I think most of you probably know Brian was the 2nd president at Davidson County Community College, and now lives outside of Asheville and worked with Pat when Pat was a faculty member and coach at Davidson County Community College. I follow all this not because I ever had the chance to work here till last year, but I grew up in Davidson County, grew up in Thomasville, and I saw this place birth. And last year I had the great honor, thanks to Ken White, who was board chair here at Davidson County at the time. He and Beth Parrott invited me to lunch one day in January, not long after Dr. Rittling announced she was leaving, and asked me if I consider being their consultant in the presidential search. So I had the good pleasure of being over here for 6 months on campus, which was a great meeting to me. Thank you, Ken. And I think we hired a good president from everything I've seen in the past year. Darren's doing a great job. So we're going to change the order a little bit, hoping Brian, he hasn't called us, so we're hoping Dr. Brooks is on his way. But I've known Pat a long time, but I'm going to tell, and everybody knows that I tend to go too long, so I'm going to confine myself to one piece. Maybe that's right. No. So I won't stop again. If Brian comes in, we'll just switch places. I have been around the community college system for a long time, 46 years, in some kind of capacity, although I retired 18 years ago and never actually been employed at a community college since. But as most of you know, I taught part-time for 6 years at Guilford Tech in developmental after I retired. And then I did nothing for a while. Then the Gates Foundation hired me and I did their community college grants in North Carolina. Spent a lot of time over here where a bunch of that money got invested at Davidson County Community College. And then I retired again. And then 4 years ago, when Scott Rawls left to go to Northern Virginia, the state board asked me to serve as interim president of the system. I thought that was going to be a 5-month job. It turned into a 1-year job. And then I haven't retired since, although I continue to do some volunteer work, such as doing the search here and now serving with Burr Sullivan on the state board. I'll introduce Burr later in the program. Burr Sullivan on a task force that's looking at our enrollment situation and the demographics of North Carolina. And that's how that's affecting enrollment throughout the system at each of our 58 colleges. But I knew Pat somewhat when I was at Western Piedmont Community College and active in a few associations and had contacts here at Davidson County. But I really got to know Pat directly as a result of the North Carolina Community College Leadership Program. In 1989, I had been at Western Piedmont Community College for 16 years, never thought I'd leave. Had just built a brand new house, first new house I'd ever lived in as an adult. And never thought I'd ever leave. And Bob Scott, who was the president of the system then, called me up one day and I went down and visited with him. He had offered me a job earlier in his stay in Raleigh, and I told him two things. I didn't want to leave Western Piedmont and I didn't want to live in Raleigh. And but he offered me an opportunity I couldn't say no to. Some of you will remember that on the 25th anniversary of our system's history, the State Board of Community Colleges and the General Assembly, the State Board had been created in 1980, and the State Board decided to form a commission on the future of the North Carolina Community College system. And the goal of the commission, which included business industry people, a few community college presidents, a few members of the State Board, Burr, and several members of the General Assembly, and a few of outside people from the university system, about 30-some members, 35 members as I recall, took a year to look at the system where we were and to project out where we were going. And their report, which I hope some of you will read sometime, it's really interesting. I suggested Jennifer Haygood last week in Pinehurstburg that we ought to reprint it and share it with people because it's the same themes we're talking about now. We were talking about 25 years ago. But the commission's report, 33 recommendations, changed this system dramatically. Just a few examples. All 58 colleges within 3 years converted from a quarter system to a semester system. We had a brand new FTE funding program put in. We all had to do long-range planning, which sounds routine now, strategic planning, just lots of things. But one recommendation in particular sticks out relative to Pat. There was a recommendation that we ought to do more for the professional development of our faculty and staff, where we're going to get the future leaders of the system, a problem that still haunts us today with so many presidential turnovers as a result of, primarily as a result of retirement. And here's an interesting statistic for you. During the study of the commission's study, and one particular task force that Brian Brooks was on, he was then president of this college, particularly looked at our budget situation. And we took every single expenditure that we could imagine could be interpreted as professional development, including all travel in the North Carolina Community College system. And guess what? It amounted to less than 0.5% of the total system budget. Less than 0.5%. And at the time, E.K. Fretwell, who was on the commission and then was the chancellor of UNC Charlotte. Some of you may remember that name. EK had found this article where the average Fortune 500 company in America was spending 8% of its budget for development of its employees. And we were in the education business, and we were spending less than 0.5%. Well, one day, a group of women from the AAWCJC, the North Carolina chapter of the American Association of Women in Community and Junior Colleges, got hold of me. Oh, so Bob Scott hired me to come to Raleigh to take over the work of the Commission on the Future and stay with him for 3 years to implement those 33 recommendations, which is what I did. So they got hold of me and they said, we got a plan for professional development. And Susan Allred, who is so good to see again, Dr. Allred was a long time, always at Forsyth, right? That's the only place I remember you. And it's so good to see you again. And I forget Shirley Luckadoo from Rowan Cabarrus and my good friend, longtime friend, Billy Meeks. And it seems like there was one more I'm leaving out.
And Bonnie Stone.
All right, from Sandhills. So they came and talked to me and said, well, if you can get us some money from Governor Scott, we're going to start a program in leadership development for the community college system. So I went and talked to Governor Scott, and Governor Scott found $15,000, as I recall. Then what was it? $10,000. And to get them to start this program. And Pat and I became instant good friends and developed the first program. And I think almost every year over the last 30, I've had some role in the program. We've redesigned it a couple of times, but mostly I've been the presenter about the history and mission of the system and how that impacts leadership, which I've enjoyed immensely. I never drive down 311 through Asheboro that I almost don't turn to go to Camp Caraway. We've been there so many times. But particularly those of you who work for community colleges, here's my most interesting thing about this program. Besides the more than 1,000 now, as I recall, graduates of this program over the last 30 years. For those of you that aren't in higher education, you won't be familiar with this, but most of us who have been around community colleges in particular over the last few decades, among faculty and staff, there's kind of a joke going, and that is, what's going to be the initiative this year, right? And there's a joke among faculty and staff, and what do you call those initiatives? I hear it everywhere I go, the flavor of the month. The flavor of the month. So what's going to be our flavor of the month? And I can tell you, having worked with the Gates Foundation, I've gone to a lot of colleges later, after we sunk a lot of money, and 3 or 4 years later, I look around and I can't see any effects of the program whatsoever once the money left. Well, this is a program that with $10,000 as seed money has lasted 30 years. 31 years. You could be my wife the way you correct me.
I don't want this current class to be
Yeah, 31 years. Well, I'm thinking, of 1989 when we got it started. And that says something about leadership itself, right? Because when you've heard me at these sessions that I participate in, got one coming up next month, don't we? One of the things I talk about in terms of leadership, one of the key things is I think someone who is persistent and can stay with it. And even when there's rough spots in the road and it looks like things aren't going well, you keep at it. I tell a story, which I'm not going to tell now, but it's a great story about Dallas Herring. And he's just phenomenal. I mean, he served on the State Board of Education for 22 years, 20 as the chair. Had Luther Hodges finally tell him, okay, I'm going to fund some industrial education centers, but I better never see a library. Then took on Sanford and just kept at it till this system was born. I think about Felix G. and Doak Finch here. Davis County was one of the original counties designated to have one of the original 20 industrial education centers. There was a deadline. And Davidson County couldn't get a bond passed to get the matching money. And the deadline was running out. And the people in Salisbury were just hoping Davidson County didn't come up with the money because they wanted that industrial education center in Rowan County. And Felix G. and Doak Finch from Lexington and Thomasville, respectively, went out and got the money, the matching money that made this possible. So Pat's had that kind of persistence with this program, has really followed through. And I'm just amazed, and I've said this to you before, with the number of things that have come and gone, that this one has stayed. And it's for a lot of reasons, but it's primarily because of your leadership. Now, one more end of this story. So 12 months, some of you have seen this before. 12 months after Governor Scott came up with the $10,000, which I think I told you that in one of my last visits with him at Hall River before he had to go to a nursing home, he talked about this program. He says, you know, that's probably one of the best investments we ever made. And I think he was right. But this same group of persuasive women from the AEW CJC, I thought I was going to become an honorary member. They came back to see me again. So we got another favor to ask. I said, what's that? He says, we want to have the graduation at Melville Farms. Now, if you don't know North Carolina history, you don't know that Melville Farms was the home of Carr Scott and Bob Scott out in Hall River, a big dairy farm. So I went to see Governor Scott into his office and said, are you willing to do this? He says, you need to go talk to Jessie Ray. That was his wife. So I went and talked to Jessie Ray, and Jessie Ray said, George, we're going to do it if one thing. I said, what? He says, you're going to be in charge because Bob won't do a darn thing but walk around and talk to people. So we had a big cookout, and I hauled charcoal grills out there and charcoal hamburger and everything, and we had a cookout. And those first graduates that year, so that would have been in 19, Susan, you were in the first class? Huh? Okay. Well, so I guess the graduation must have been 1990 in the spring, and it was a beautiful day. And I stayed out there the midnight cleaning up after it was over. But Pat gave each of the graduates a sweatshirt. Now, I want you to read the sweatshirt.
Community college leadership, developing visionary leaders for the next 25 years.
For the next 25 years. Remember, the Commission on the Future was the 25th anniversary. So the report was projecting out the next 25 years. Now tell me how many initiatives you know of that were projected to last 25 years at your church or anywhere and actually made it to the 25th year. And now we stand at the 31st year. Now, Pat, as you know, you've heard me tell this story. This has been my pride and joy. I've worn it trout fishing. I've worn it surf fishing. But yesterday I got it out and I laundered it. And it's threadbare in a few places. And I know you're going to get a more valuable award in a minute. But you told me you no longer had yours.
Oh, I do.
Well, you got this one.
Well, I'm not taking
You
your
are. I have really enjoyed it, and I've worn it a lot. People always, I've been many times in the surf at Curie Beach, and people have come up to me and said, "What's that all about?" And I'll tell them about Pat. But Pat, your leadership in so many ways, and I've watched you over the years how you've done this. And the one thing that's amazed me over the length of the time was not just that you stuck with it, but you've always had the ability, which lots of leaders, in fact, few leaders have. Darren Hartness has got this talent. I've already seen it in the last year. You can look at the big picture, the program, and look at each individual who's in that program at the same time and focus both on the big picture and the individual person. And on behalf of my boss and good friend, Bob Scott, thank you for all you did.
Thank you, George. So now Justin Nichols, he's prepared the slides that we saw earlier with some of the testimonials that different people that have been through the program have left for Dr. Pat. But there's also a couple of videos that some people sent that Justin's going to share with us. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Justin. We also wanted to ask Ms. Allred if she would come up to share a couple words with us, being from the very first class of the NCCCLP.
Well, George and everybody else has made me feel about 110 because I'm from the very first class. Of course, Pat and I go way back, and we are before that leadership program ever started. But I knew what was going on, and I worked with her and Shirley some, and I knew I wanted to be in that very first class, and I was. And I had the good fortune afterwards to also serve as the co-director for 2 years, and then came back periodically to do sessions with the graduates or the participants. It meant a lot to me. That leadership program gave me the strength in my day and time as a woman, breaking the barriers and going up in senior leadership. And it meant a lot to me. But the person that meant the most to me beyond the program was Pat. And you've seen from the videos, from the testimonials and everything else, that she's the heart and soul of this program. And without her, it just would not go. And she's always been my friend. We have lost touch recently, but we regained each other on Facebook a while back. Good old Facebook gets you in touch with people. And she was always there for me during some of my struggles and when I was developing my career, as a friend, as a mentor, as a confidant. I knew that I could trust her with ever. And she's so easy to be around and to share with. And one thing I remember when I saw her today is her love of purple. I remember that stood out in my mind right away. But I think that this program wouldn't be here if it were not for Pat. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't have lasted as long as it has. And I'm so proud that it's lasted so long. I didn't really know that it was still going on. So I'm really happy to be here and share that. But I know you've come a long way from our first year, but I'll tell you, our class was very, very special. And it was a good thing. I'm glad that we did it. So I'm glad that you're doing this today for Pat. I'm glad that she's receiving this award because I can't think of anybody better who so richly deserves it. Thanks.
No sign of Dr. Brooks. I hate Brian couldn't be here. I've talked to him several times, and he was looking forward to it. For those of you who don't know, Brian now lives outside of Asheville, lived in Blowing Rock for a good while when he left here. As I recall, I kind of kept up with Brian because Brian and Jean lived back door to my mother and dad over in Thomasville. And when I retired early, I took care of my mother and dad over in Thomasville. I kept up with Brian, and Brian worked with the endowment board, as I recall, with the School of Education at Appalachian State. Jean practiced law in Blowing Rock, and since they moved over to Buncombe County, and Brian was looking forward to being here. But I know that Brian was an interesting president. I told Ken White and Beth Parrott when we had lunch that day, and they asked me what I'd be interested in. I said, yeah, I always wanted to work at Davidson County Community College. I never got a chance. And Brian had such a great senior staff. We talked about my coming here a few times. One of the greatest honors I had during the Commission on the Future, I came here several times for things, spoke to a big community group one time and down in the cafeteria. But Brian invited me to speak to the Thomasville Rotary Club. And my dad was a member of that. And he arranged for both my dad and my mother to be there. And he had Wink Capel. If any of you from Davidson County, you'll remember Wink Capel. Had Wink Capel introduced me and had Don Truell say a few words. Now, those of you from Davidson County, Don Truell is now the chair of the Davidson County Board of Commissioners. But Don Truell, besides my daddy, was my first boss. He was in charge of circulation. Some of you in Davidson County can't believe that's where the way Don Truell started. He was in charge of circulation for the Thomasville Times. And I was a paper boy for the Thomasville Times from age 13 to age 16. And Ken White knows this story. That's why I get up at 3:30 still every morning, because I had to pick up my papers at West End Grocery and carry all the way down Lexington Avenue to where now the hospital is, the old Long Farm, and get back home before my daddy left for work at 6:30. But Don Truell was my circulation manager. And before, somebody may wonder, how did he become chief of police? Well, he, at his night beat, he wrote the police report for the Thomasville Times. He'd hang around across the street there at the Thomasville Times. He'd hang around at the old police department. And he got to know Paul Shore, who was the chief of police, who talked him into going into police work. And that's how he got into police work, eventually become the chief of police. But Brian Brooks has told me a lot about what he thought about Pat. And Brian was one of these guys. He had a major role. We had several presidents who had major roles in the implementation of the commission report. But Brian and Marvin Joyner at Central Carolina Community College were the two keys, because Brian had to convince the presidents that conversion to a semester system was not only a good thing, but it was doable, because lots of people didn't want to convert to the semester system. Nurses said you couldn't teach nursing on a semester system. Yeah. Mary Rittling would have thought different as a nurse, but Brian did. And a lot of people didn't want to redo the funding formula, because we had 20 rural colleges that were really struggling. I mentioned this down at Pinehurst the other day. And we totally redid the funding formula and created a larger base formula of the base allotment that every college got. And Ruth Shaw, some of you will remember Ruth Shaw, later became president of Duke Energy, but she was president of Central Piedmont Community College at the time. Ruth said that Central Piedmont, that we robbed Central Piedmont of a lot of money and spread it out among the small colleges. But Brian Brooks led the way on that and convinced the presidents that this is what we need to do. And of course, it helped a lot of things, particularly articulation for transfer students into four-year colleges and universities. But one of the things that always impressed me about Brian, and Pat, I bet you can sense this, but I learned most of this from Dolores Linegood, who still is a faculty member here. And Dolores and I grew up next door to each other in Thomasville. And it always surprised me, because I would think, having been a college president, that Dolores would be a person that was hard to get along with. But Brian loved her. Brian said, I really like Dolores Lyman, because when she comes to tell you something, you know that she's telling you exactly what she thinks, and it's going to stay right there. And Brian kind of had that reputation, Pat, as I understand it, with faculty and staff. And I regret that he can't be here. Well, we're going to move on. It's my pleasure to introduce Burr Sullivan. Burr is currently a member of the State Board of Community Colleges, and I really haven't known Burr since he's been on the state board. And he and I, as I mentioned, are serving on, I was hoping that was Brian coming in, are serving on a task force together. But I knew of Burr. One time I was in this very room shortly after the conference center was built. Well, the walls were open. And I was helping Mary with some kind of community leadership, Lexington, or was it Davidson County? Lexington.
They had an in-house community.
I know that. This was the community. Leadership Davidson County. Thank you. And Burr was the speaker before I was, and I got here early, as I normally do, and I was listening to him. Burr, you were the director of the Lexington Chamber of Commerce at that time, I believe, but you had a previous life in the printing industry. Did I get that right? In the printing industry. And Burr came on the state board a year ago, roughly 2 years ago. And I believe, I stand to be corrected, but I believe Burr is the only person from Davidson County ever appointed to the State Board of Community Colleges. Someone corrected me here one time and said, no, Mindy Mendenhall did. No, I don't think so. I knew Mindy well, died, what, a month ago? And a longtime friend. Now, Mindy was very active in the North Carolina Association of Community College trustees. In fact, and that's how I got to know him, sat on the executive board for a long time. And I believe actually got involved in the National Association of Community College Trustees as well. But I believe Burr is the first person from Davidson County to ever serve on the State Board of Community Colleges. And I can tell you, having served on this task force with him, he knows a lot about Davidson County Community College, but as a result, he's been able to translate that into his role on the state board, and is certainly doing a strong job as a member of the State Board of Community College. Burr?
George didn't tell the part that when I retired from my printing business and the Chamber of Commerce work, that my wife was greatly worried about what she was going to do with me being in her. I took early retirement at 71, and she was greatly worried about me being around the house. So the word around Davidson County was that she asked our representative in Raleigh if he could find a board in Raleigh that would get me out of town for a few days a month and give her a little bit of a break. But I am enjoying my time in Raleigh, and I am honored to be here on behalf of our state board today for this celebration to recognize Pat Akers for her very successful career. And I would say, in looking at Pat's career, it's been more of a calling for her to train leaders all across the state. She probably wouldn't even define it as work, although a lot of work has gone into what she's done, but it has been a calling. And obviously the state is much better off because of her leadership. Now, I go back a long ways in Davidson County, and I remember the time long before Governor Scott and George Fouts asked Pat to develop the program the statewide program that he has just spoken about. I remember the time in the early 1980s, when our Chambers of Commerce here in Davidson County came to our brand new president. And if he was here, I was going to rib him a little bit and say he had very dark, wavy hair in those days, which he did, Brian Brooks. And he was brand new to the college, and our chambers here asked him to help us develop a leadership program that would help businesses and governmental units and the 4 school systems, this college and the 3 public school systems, train emerging leaders. Brian immediately said, yes, this is a good idea, and Pat Akers will be the very best person to develop that program. 32 years later, that program is still going in Davidson County. It is Leadership Davidson County. And we have graduated over 600 leaders, some of which work now. I think most of Dr. Hartness's vice presidents today are graduates of Leadership Davidson County. So it's a program that Pat developed, and she went on to develop the DCCC Academy, which trained leaders here that were both instructors as well as non-instructional people. The non-instructional people have to have leadership skills too. And she developed that academy and has trained a number of people. And then, of course, as George alluded to, Governor Scott saw the great need all across the state to have leaders trained specifically to run community colleges. The 1,000 people that Pat has trained are now running our great 58 community colleges. They are the presidents, and they are the vice presidents, and they are department heads in all of the 58 colleges all over the state. And George and I spent a couple of days last week in Pinehurst talking about opportunities and challenges facing our schools. And there are equal parts of those things. You know, we do have a number of counties that are losing population. That's what brought our task force into being. About 47 of our counties and out of the 100 are losing population right now. And many others are growing like crazy. And but the opportunities are there all over the state. And for us to capitalize on those opportunities, we have to have leaders. And what Pat has done over the last, since 1989 with the North Carolina Community College Leadership Program is give us the people that can bring about the changes and that can manage the challenges that we face today, and we're all extremely optimistic. I mean, the sun is shining on North Carolina Community College now in ways it hadn't before, and some of that is that, the chance for parents to be absent 2 years of debt if their child goes to the community college. And there's just a lot of opportunities out there. And we are very bullish on the opportunities at hand. So with no further delay, I want to, we're all here for a presentation, and I'm going to read this on behalf of Roy Cooper. He may be upset if he knew that a Republican appointee to the state school board was reading this on behalf of a Democratic governor, but we have to have bipartisan support. So we work with Roy Cooper and everybody else. So Pat, my pleasure to give you this on behalf of the state of North Carolina. Roy Cooper, Governor, reposing special confidence in the integrity, learning, and zeal of Dr. Patricia Akers. I do hereby present and confer the Order of the Longleaf Pine with the rank of Ambassador Extraordinary, privileged to enjoy fully all rights granted to members of this exalted order, among which is the special privilege to propose the following North Carolina toast in select company anywhere in the free world. And the toast, you'll have it down by heart here shortly. Here's to the land of the longleaf pine, the summer land where the sun does shine, where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. Here's to down home, the old North State. Signed, Governor Roy Cooper, June the 1st, 2019. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Thank you, Mr. Hartness, for having us here. Thank all of you for coming. And I was going to bring my stool to make me a little taller, but we forgot that, didn't we? Okay. I'm so excited about this award here today and to be honored as a recipient of the Order of the Longleaf Pine. I'm grateful to Governor Roy Cooper for approving me and to those who prepared my nomination. I want to thank a special thanks to the class of NCCCLP class of 2019 who thought up the idea. And also to George Fouts, Jennifer Haygood, and Garrett Henshaw for submitting letters of reference for me. Much appreciation also goes to people that work behind the scenes. They're a special team from the class of 2019 who have organized this celebration from the get-go. And I'd like them to wave or stand or whatever, and we appreciate what you've done. Michael Boone, who you met, John Hardy, where's Kevin, Justin Nichols, where's Mr. Nicely? Alan Nicely, Stacy Waters, Bailey Waters is not here today, and our director, Lisa Eads. In addition, Mr. Kent Schaffner, stand up, Kent. They made this all possible. I'd also like to thank Davidson Community College for hosting this event. When the North Carolina Community College management team had their retreat this summer, and they informed me that I had received this award, I didn't wipe the grin off my face for weeks. It was then that I began to reflect upon the people who had given me lots of opportunities to influence others and to reach my dream. You want to come up here and pretend you're Brian, George? Because I'm going to say some things about him too. I started at Davidson Community College in the fall of 1976. And in '88, I was encouraged to apply for the National Leaders Program. And they sent me. And one of our requirements for the program was to complete a project. And so we were talking to the chambers at that time. And so my project was to develop a grassroots leadership program that I could bring back to Davidson County. And you had a year to finish it. So I knew I had to do it. And I had support to do it. So that year we worked on working with the two chambers. We went around, Teeny Bingham was working with them then, with the Thomasville Chamber, I think. And we went around and took pictures so we could market the program. I wasn't going to say this, but Thomasville and Lexington didn't talk to each other back then too much. There was such rivalry with the athletic teams. And so this was an effort by the college and an effort on my part to finish my project, but to get people talking to each other. So we developed the Leadership Davidson County. 32 years later, and guess what? One of the jobs I had later on was a small business center director. The person who is facilitating that program now, Marilyn Taylor, I helped her start her small business way back then. And now she's a successful consultant. Brian Brooks opened a lot of doors for me. And at the college, he saw the leadership potential that I had, but I was green, I was. And he encouraged me to take positions here that I would have never thought about before. I would never have ventured into becoming a small business center director. I'd never even had a small business. I didn't know how to start one. I'd not even worked in one, but I learned. And I took each of the pairs of people that wanted to start their own business, and we worked together. Not only did we work on starting small businesses, but we also worked on developing professional development for these employees in these businesses. I remember going to businesses at lunch and teaching fitness classes for employees and other things. This was the connection for me between the college and the partnerships in the community, getting to know the community. And the Small Business Center Directorship was something that really opened my eyes to that. Now, Brian was not as convincing when he wanted me to be the department head of engineering and manufacturing technology. And must I mention truck driving and cosmetology added to that too. But that was one of the most valuable experiences I've had. It taught me how to work with people of diverse occupations. It taught me how to solve problems, because there were a lot of problems. The people that were there before me did all the work for the other people, and I wanted them to be a team and do it for themselves. Brian, you're not here, but your confidence in me motivated me to set higher goals, and your support and guidance helped me reach them. So I guess my journey began at Davidson County Community College, where I was allowed to grow, where I was allowed to make mistakes, and where it was just like a family, wasn't it, Ann? I think I was so proud the second year that I was doing the SACS thing, and we got an accommodation for the collaboration among our faculty and staff. And people just don't get those. And it was because of Brian's leadership and I guess the opportunities he exhibited to other faculty and staff to be the best that they could be. But that really made me proud. I'd like to also give a personal thanks to my brother, John, wave at him, for his encouragement throughout my career. He even drove 12-hour round trip today to be here to share this with me. I love you, babe, I really do. I also want to recognize my adopted brother, Reed Thornburg. Reed has also been intimate in my life and always encouraging me. Reed was in our first class of leadership, Davidson County. And now he's a successful consultant working with the state. What are you doing anyway? Healthcare, working in healthcare. But he was one of our primary people in that program. I'd like to pay special thanks to another dear friend who's encouraged me throughout my whole life, Miss Juanita Yarborough. Juanita was my mentor and my supervisor at Davidson, former supervisor. She's been my special cheerleader throughout my whole career, and started at day one at Davidson Community College, and she still tries to teach me life lessons when I go astray. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here today. There are far too many names that I would like to mention who have contributed to the successes I've had and why I'm receiving this award today, but I don't think you want to stay here all night. The idea was to grow our own leadership. And George, I think that's why we've been successful, because after 7 years, we got no money because there were budget hard times. So there was no more financial assistance from the system office. So we had to figure out a way to work within a budget to sustain the program that we wanted to deliver. I want to thank the 31 directors, each who dedicated 4 years of their lives, one as a participant, one as a director, co-director, one as a director, and one as on the executive board as a past director. They made our program excellent. And many thanks and love to each of you. Stand if you were one of our directors. Yeah. Thank you. These 1,060+ graduates have also formed an alumni association. This alumni association designs professional development still, so networking can continue across the state. And the thing is, we figure out how to work smarter and not harder. We figure out ways that we can collaborate and work together and not spend so much money, but have a good time while we're doing it. My dream and my mission was to bring others together for the common good. The thing I wanted to do when I took the Stephen Covey training, we had to write our mission statement. And the bulk of mine ended in, I really wanted to make a difference in the lives of others. I wanted to care, to connect, and collaborate. I was proud to be an employee at Davidson County Community College, which included that working with 2 chambers to create the leadership program, and also providing employees in business and industry with professional development. And it thrills me to recognize over 1,060+ graduates who participated in this program to prepare them to take a leadership role in their own college. One phase has always stuck with me, and that phase is, if you can dream it, you can do it. Shirley Luckadoo and I went, when the year before we started working with Governor Scott, went to an AAWCJC meeting in Florida, and we just happened to go to Disney World and saw that big white ball, and it said, if you can dream it, you can do it. So I figured that was a good mantra for me to work on. Receiving this award would not have been possible without the inspiration from all of you. To all of you here and out across the state who couldn't be here, a group hug, we do that, And a sincere thank you for being part of my dream and for helping me make a difference. Remember, the poet Maya Angelou said, people remember what you say. People don't remember what you say. They don't remember what you do, but they remember how you made them feel. I will forever treasure this award of the Order of the Longleaf Pine, and I promise to uphold its values. And in conclusion, I hope that I've made as much of an impact on your lives as you've made on mine. Thank you again for the celebration and for being here today. I'm quite appreciative. And I can name everybody in the room, but I won't bore you with that. Michael.
So thank you all for coming. I know it was special for Dr. Pat. Remember to keep paying it forward, continue to grow, and continue to encourage others to grow. So there's a lot of love in this room and online for Dr. Pat, so let's keep that love going. So thank you. We have a small reception next door, so please visit us, speak with Dr. Pat, give her a hug, continue the hugs as well, and have safe travels home when you're done. Thank you all.